Welcome to another episode of Tell Me More. We're very glad y'all are listening. We're on a streak with Dr. Wiles back, and we're marching through the Sermon on the Mount, and we're trying to unpack this big old theme of mercy today. And it's a very fruitful conversation, and we're super glad you're here.
Well, here we are. It's time for another episode of Tell Me More.
Welcome.
We're doing it.
We're here.
On Monday morning.
On Monday morning.
Yeah,
President's Day,
we're at
no
our
less.
normal
Yeah, that's right. Look at us.
slotted time. Which, can I ask y'all, today's an AISD holiday. Mm-hmm. It's President's Day today, I believe.
It is President's Day.
Church is still open, the CDC is still open, but AISD is closed. So can I ask, what's your family doing today? Both of y'all are affected by this.
We're celebrating the presidents at our house. We always have a big.
He can't even get through it.
For those of you listening, not watching.
Yeah. And I'd say this is really a great decade to really
Sorry.
just celebrate the presidency.
Sorry. Anyway, but,
Really, let's just raise our glass to the
anyway,
good work of
we're,
the commanders-in-chief of late.
Not sure. My wife is speaking this morning out at where some of our folks live down south.
Oh, yeah, she's
with
at
that
the
crew.
Frasers.
Yeah.
The
She's
double
so
Frasers.
sweet.
To be honest, I go there often. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. It's a really sweet place. Though.
It is and it's a sweet group.
It is. So
But
she's
your,
doing
and
that.
your, but your kids are out of school.
They are.
Grandkids,
Our
I mean,
grandkids.
obviously.
We had
Yep.
a huge grandkid weekend for Valentine's. Yes, big time. We Friday night
I love it.
extravaganza. Little Gideon spent the night with
At your
us
house? Oh,
at
wow.
our house.
Oh,
and
wow.
So we, I'm
That's
now,
fun.
I'm pretty much an expert on Paw
So
Patrol.
did y'all have grandkid Valentine extravaganza so that your kids could have like
Correct.
adult
That is right.
Valentine
Yes.
extra? Oh, how
Yes.
nice! What a
well,
great
Hannah,
gift.
Hannah came to our house, but Josiah
But you
and
let
Adrian.
Josiah and Adrian slip
We
away.
went
That's
to
great.
to some comedy show and dinner and all that. So we had Gideon all night
Sweet.
and spent the night. And anyway, and he was with us again yesterday afternoon most of the day. So I'm a Paw Patrol. In case you need to know, Marshall and Chase.
Oh,
and
I love it.
Sky and Rebel.
I love it.
I'm on it. We actually have a big transforming station where the vehicles get turned into Paw Patrol. So yeah, it's awesome.
Cool.
So
Very
Gideon and I,
cool.
we've been
a big
pawing it.
weekend.
We've been pawing it up.
Pawing it up.
Pawing it up.
We never did Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
We're
It's not
still
for
in our Miss
everybody.
Rachel era.
It's not for everybody.
We have not exposed them to the fact that there are more than one show. That there's more than one show.
Yeah.
We're just pretty much
just-
a diehard PBS kids.
They just know that Miss Rachel, when the TV's on, it's Miss Rachel.
Yeah.
It's like the Miss Rachel machine.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like. It's
Oh, yeah,
simple.
she's awesome.
Yeah, we're pro Miss Rachel.
Our
for
grandkids
sure.
like Miss Rachel.
Yeah, you know Miss Rachel's a Christian, and she met her husband at church.
I did not know that.
She's a committed Christian in New York City, which is not easy. So
Yeah.
props to Miss Rachel.
We also we do
Respect that.
Doc
Yeah.
McStuffins. This is one of our go-tos.
What is that?
Doc McStuffins.
I have not been exposed to Doc McStuffins.
Oh, really?
Really? Sorry.
Oh, she's
We're pretty much
the,
PBS kids.
She's the veterinarian for all the little stuffed animals. Doc McStuffins.
Is it its own show?
Yeah.
Doc
oh, yeah, it's
McStuffins?
huge.
Thoughts on Wildcrats?
Well, she I don't know what it is, but we actually have the ambulance and we have her whole hospital
Well,
room
Ben,
and
all
everything.
my triplets are all distinctly different, which I love. Ben is an animal lover.
Oh, he would love Doc McStuffins.
Like, we're worried he has like an emotional attachment to like these little rubber, animals that
You're
he's
going to
playing
try
with.
Wildcrats.
Okay, he loves animals. The zoo is a really sweet experience with Ben Hodges.
Wildcrats
if any of
is
y'all
the
would like to
Krat
go,
Brothers.
hit me up.
But it's a cartoon now because they've aged.
Okay.
So, okay, now look, tell me what your family's up to today.
They, I was home for most of the morning. My wife's a teacher, so anytime there's a school holiday, she tries to maximize the day with appointments that she, would otherwise have to take a day off to do.
Yeah, go to the doctor, go to
So
the dentist.
This morning,
Maybe treat yourself.
Yeah.
A pedicure, a massage.
that'd be fun.
Maybe more the
just-
medical side. Okay.
It's probably more medical, just catching up. So this morning I hung out with the girls. We worked on a little project for Lucy's pre-K class. Came here to record the podcast. And I'll go home again this afternoon because our oldest daughter has a dentist appointment. So one of us will go to the dentist and one of us will stay home with our youngest daughter, Lucy. So
I love
There
it.
you go.
but they're playing with friends right now. So they got to go over to a friend's house and play, which they were super excited about.
Well, I think just shout out to the presidents that y'all are getting to do all that today.
Thank you, presidents.
I never know if it's President's Day, like with an apostrophe
Yeah.
before
Where's
or
the
after it, or
I
maybe
think
not
it
even
honors.
one.
I think it
I
honors
think
all
it's
of
the
them.
plurality
right?
of presidents.
Can I ask you, Dr. Wiles, as a historian, who's your favorite president? Do you have
George
one?
Washington.
Really?
Yeah.
Just
Classic choice.
Yeah.
He's the father of our country.
Just OG.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just, I just think he was I think he helped set the stage for what America should be in the long run. It wasn't perfect. None of them were.
Nope.
But I'd say after him, Abraham Lincoln probably.
So some of the
would be-
early, you like the
would
early
be-
guys.
Yeah. And, I just love the things that they accomplished. And in the modern era, my father was a huge Harry Truman fan, and he was a Baptist, so that my dad that puts you in good stead.
The only president from Missouri.
I was just reading about Harry Truman this morning. I mean, not deeply, but
He was
we're researching the National Day of
president at a
Prayer.
very hard time in America. Obviously, he's the one that ended World War II, so it's a little bit somewhat controversial.
If you ever get the chance, you should go to his presidential library. It's in Independence,
I
which
haven't
is
been to that.
Is it? Is it? Yeah.
so
I've been to the
Independence,
Reagan
Missouri.
National
I've not
Library,
done that one.
yeah, in California, and but yeah,
I was actually because the George Bush is at George H.W. is at A&M. Am I right
That's
about that?
correct.
Not.
George W. is at SMU.
Yes.
Yeah, I've
George,
been to that one.
George, I've never been, but I grew up around there, and I was talking about wanting to go because that's a trip home for me is to go do that. You know.
The Lincoln Library is great too.
Yeah, I've
Worth
Presidential
the
libraries,
Yeah,
they're well done.
they're
All
pretty
of the
awesome.
ones. I mean, I don't know how many I've been to, but they're worth a day.
And
so.
this past summer, we took the kids to Mount Vernon and, a little tour. We also went to Monticello, to Jefferson, and James Madison. So, we've had some brilliant people do this, So, but yeah, I'm a George Washington guy.
Love it.
One of my favorite shows I don't know if it's on BBC, if it's on Netflix, I don't remember, but it's Washington Spies, where George Washington basically invented the civilian spy network, because there was no such thing in those days. Everything was built around the military, and so it was very hush-hush that he actually agreed to let amateurs, I guess you could say,
Yeah, outsiders.
be
whatever.
a part of, providing intelligence for the Revolutionary Army, the Continental Army, and that was So when you go to the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., they have a big shout-out to that Washington kind of invented all of that.
That's wild.
Yeah.
This is an aside, but it's something I learned recently. Did you know that Julia Child was once one of the higher-ranking research operatives at what became the CIA?
No.
What?
So before Julia Child was a famous chef, she was like a high-level researcher at the organization that became the CIA.
And that little known fact.
And then they left that to move to France and cook.
Yeah, she became a French chef.
How about it?
Some people do
You
more
just don't know what you're going to learn
in
on
one
this
lifetime
podcast.
than many people do in many
Like I
lifetimes.
said, shout out to President's Day.
Here we are.
Happy President's Day.
Exactly.
So
Wherever
on this
you
day,
are. Okay, yeah.
Of all
Keep us
days.
moving, Luke.
On
Keep
this
us
day
you
of
moving.
all
did
days.
preach a sermon yesterday.
Turns out
He's back.
I did, yeah.
He's been back,
He's back.
but he's really back.
Jen and I have been joking because he's back and his notes are long. His pastor's Bible study notes, which we normally put on a half page, they got a full 8.5 by 11 front
right.
and back.
I've been out, y'all, so
Yeah, we like it. No, it's
pent
good.
up.
It's good.
It is good.
Teach us what you want us to know.
yeah.
So I have the notes pulled up from your sermon that you sent to
Mercy.
us, and it's also
Lord, have it.
Lord have mercy.
it's a 4-page PDF.
Yeah, a lot of notes from Sunday. Well, you got
good.
scripture, a little bit of scripture in there.
A little, just
Yeah.
enough.
a dash.
Just enough. No, it's awesome. Don't hear me critique it. Well, the critique can be good, but don't hear me
Yeah,
complain about
it's
it.
all good.
It's awesome. So, okay, can I kind of kick this off?
Please do.
You had a little quote, and I want you to expand on this. I think it can take us some places. You said you don't mind this little statement, but it may be overly simplistic of a very mature, robust word.
Right.
Words, mercy and grace. And so you talked about how we've kind of learned along the way that grace is the giving of something undeserved,
Correct.
and mercy is maybe the withholding of something that is deserved. Is that fair? It's a really, but you said it's not wrong, but it really doesn't open up the expanse of mercy and grace when we talk about them.
Yeah, that's what I'd
Yeah.
say. I mean,
You wanna talk
I
more about
get
that?
it. I think it's an attempt to delineate between or differentiate between
And that may be a good start.
grace and mercy, and they are distinguished in the Scripture. I think every time they're used together, grace always comes first. I'm pretty sure that's right.
What do you think about that?
But I think that's appropriate, that you enter into this relationship with God and experience His grace. Well, then to me, it's an evidence also of His mercy. And then as you're being transformed by the grace of God, you learn about the mercy of God, and hopefully that'll be on display in your life. And so that's why Sunday morning I wanted to start with, even though Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful," so he's talking to us, but I wanted to make sure we understood God's mercy. He's rich in mercy, and kind of spend a few minutes just contemplating the complexity of what that really means before we try to figure out what does it mean in our own lives as we exhibit mercy. And so the mercy of God to me is multifaceted. I mean, it's, when as I said Sunday morning, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and Hebrew was translated, the Old Testament was translated into Greek. We talked a little bit about this last week when the Jews started living outside of Israel and they get Hellenized. They're all speaking Greek. Some of them actually, as best we can tell, lost their connection with Aramaic or Hebrew, so they couldn't even read the Scripture anymore. So, one of the Ptolemies said in Egypt, let's get this into the hands of the Jewish people who actually can read it. And so these 72 scholars are the ones evidently who are credited with translating the Hebrew text into Greek. Greek's a much more expansive language than Hebrew, all due respect to Hebrew. It just is a huge vocabulary in Greek. And so it's always fascinating to me to study the Septuagint, because that helps us understand our New Testament writers, because they almost all use the Septuagint rather than the Hebrew text. And so that's why it's such an important document to us, that it informs some of the New Testament theology. And so you have this really deep and rich word in Hebrew, hesed, that's found 250-something times.
You really got to say it with the back of your throat.
Yeah, I know. I'm not as good at that.
I'm not going to do it into a microphone because that just wouldn't be kind to the listener.
Yeah, it's one of those guttural sounds.
Yeah, we can transliterate it. We can English it.
Which even helps you know why sometimes it's written with a CH instead of an H. But it's such a deep word, and I'm always fascinated with these words that somehow receive word clusters when they're translated, and this is one of them. I mean, it's loving kindness, it's mercy, it's love, it's covenant love, it's loyal love, it's steadfast love, it's mercy. I mean,
and if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, so I'm going to couch that, I'm pretty sure this is one of those words in the Old Testament that only God really cheseds.
Correct.
People don't.
Right.
This is not a word that gets used. So there's a Hebrew word for love. It's a hav. People have.
Very
God
common
cannot
word.
have.
Right.
God cheseds.
That's right.
People don't.
I think you're right about that, Luke. I just know that it is his word for his covenant love. It is this deep, rich word. But what's interesting is it's not always translated love.
No.
It's mercy, or like I said, loving
Tender
kindness,
kindness.
all of those kind of words. And so it's interesting to me when the Septuagint comes into being, these Jewish scholars had to decide, how do you translate that into Greek? And almost every one of them used that word eleos, or Elias, how you want to pronounce it, which that's also a rich word in the Greek text, because we find it in the New Testament often, and it also has different ways to translate it.
Pity, compassion.
Pity, yes, all tenderhearted, sometimes even love or mercy. And I just wanted to point that out, and that's what I mean by saying that to simply just say mercy means you don't get what you deserve. Well, true, but it's way richer than that. It's about the very heart of God. It's reflecting or it's exhibiting an attribute, a divine attribute of God. So that's why I wanted to start with that. It's not just like
that scene from Gladiator.
Yeah.
And actually, it made it into Gladiator 2 because they're just.
I hadn't seen Gladiator 2
well,
yet. Yeah.
If you've seen Gladiator 1, you've seen Gladiator 2. That'd be my take. They didn't really do anything new with it. But they do that very classic scene, where Joaquin Phoenix is like thumbs up or thumbs down if the gladiator's going to die or not.
Right.
And that could be a very simplistic view of mercy.
Yeah.
If the Caesar gives his thumb up, you don't die.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a little simplistic view of God, right?
Yeah. Because it's so rich and it's connected to the very personhood of God. And that's why I love that quote by Piper, that God's anger is there, but you've got to get past these safety locks to get to his anger. But mercy, it's a hair trigger for mercy. He's prone to be merciful.
Yeah.
And there are just so many examples of that in the Scripture.
Well, I think even if I may, I think about Psalm 23:6 is one of these really notable uses in the Old Testament of this word hesed. It gets translated as love there in the NIV. So in verse 6, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. Yeah. The word I think that we don't think about a lot in that passage is follow. It's not this passive thing.
Right.
God's love and goodness and love are not these timid, passive following. The word that's translated in English as follow is actually the word that Hebrew writers would use for like persecute, hunt down, chase.
It's an active word.
It's an active, almost aggressive stance. So it's this idea that God's mercy is not just this passive, here it is.
Yeah.
It's no, this is the mercy that hunts you down, pursues you.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it Sinclair Ferguson? I can't remember. Somebody uses the imagery that goodness and mercy they're the sheepdogs of the of God for the flock.
Kind of keep the pack together.
Yeah,
That's sweet.
Kind of hold us, as a group together as special. And I can't remember which theologian it is that said that, but anyway, somebody did. And I love that image. I agree with you. I think it's active, and that's why I don't want to sell it short. That's why I wanted to at least touch base on it Sunday, touch base with it, and then transition to, well, okay, but he's really talking to us. He's not describing the mercy of God. He could have done that, which would be fine, but he basically is saying to us, you need to be merciful. And so to think about what that means to say God is merciful, well, then somehow we reflect that in our own lives. And I don't believe it comes naturally to us. I think that it's something we have to work at, that we have to learn. And that's why I was reading one of Spurgeon's morning and evening devotions, which I don't read very often, to be honest with you, but occasionally, I'll look at some of what Spurgeon says. It's been a long time. I used to read Spurgeon a lot more than I do now, and I'm not really sure why I don't read him much anymore, but I used to. When I was younger, it just seemed like more pastors referred to Spurgeon than they do nowadays.
Yeah, I haven't had a large exposure to Spurgeon.
Yeah. Well, he's
It's more like references, like from a sermon or whatnot.
Well, he's a great wordsmith. I think that's one of the reasons that preachers are drawn to him, because he just had a way of capturing thought. And he was very zealous, in his preaching. But in one of those morning and evening devotions, he challenges you to just meditate on the mercy of God. And I thought, well, I'll just share that with the church, because I know this doesn't come easy to us. So let's spend some time this week just meditating. Well, how would you meditate on mercy? So I just followed his little outline. Well, let's think about mercy.
That ain't bad.
Yeah, just walk through it. Yeah. And so I'm trying to start that this week, to myself, just reflect upon, meditate on, thank God for his mercy, and with the understanding that hopefully it comes alive in me, and somehow God balances it with justice. Jesus is perfect. Jesus was full of grace and full of truth. We've talked about that before. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, what a guy. What a man.
I'm just telling you.
Jesus Christ.
That. And so for God, mercy and justice, so how is it that God holds this world into account, which he does, obviously. And there's something hardwired into us, I think, about that. C.S. Lewis talks a lot about that. Lewis will say that, you'll see like maybe a bully picking on a smaller child in a fight, and you'll intervene. You go, wait a minute, that's not fair. Or maybe you see another situation where it lacks equity, and Lewis said, for some reason, something will rise up inside of you, and you go, wait a minute, that's not equitable. And he asked the question, why do we have that? Why is it that we look at something and just immediately say, well, no, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's not fair. And so his argument is that justice seems to be hardwired somehow into the humanity. There's something in us, even someone who has probably maybe no religious training still has some kind of feeling about things that are just unfair. They recognize it and sometimes even intervene, because you go, no, okay, well, you're not going to do that right there. Well, I don't think mercy is that natural to us,
No.
And so somehow we've got to learn.
It's more learned.
Yeah, how to have the attitude of mercy that hopefully leads to the actions of mercy. And so that's really what I was aiming at.
Yeah.
Cindy, wanted to encourage our
Yep,
people.
there's more there.
Yeah.
Go, Luke, go.
How would you describe a merciful person? I think we've talked about God's mercy, but I think Matthew 5:7 is saying, "Blessed are the merciful." It's
Right.
not just God who's expected to show mercy here. It's us. So what does a merciful person do? What are they like?
That's a great word. I mean, to me, I think they're generous in their spirit. And I guess the way I think about it is that they try to somehow see the best in others without being so quick to judge, that they're willing to at least withhold judgment until they understand more fully. Because, sometimes it's so easy to judge without knowing why a person is in a particular situation, and it's easy to make judgments about them just by your brief assessment. Well, this person is like this because of whatever we may think. Well, if we can somehow withhold judgment, suspend it for just a little bit, to at least have a deeper understanding of what may be happening inside of that person, or maybe what that person's experienced in their life. And so to me, it's a person that somehow is able to not be so quick to judge, and also is willing to extend forgiveness when they're wronged, but do it in a way that is not, they're just a doormat and just run over, and they're enabling other people's really poor behavior. It's somehow learning the nuance of trying to hold people accountable and yet still in your spirit letting them up off the mat. So
it takes a mature Christian, doesn't
it's
it?
really hard to do. And that's why I tried to allude Sunday the fact that we have to. This is something we're becoming. I don't know when we arrive, because it's just really hard. It's hard for me. There are times when I'll see a situation and I just immediately make a quick judgment. And I've had enough life experience to learn that I've been wrong sometimes. And so I'm trying to get better at extending a little bit of grace, if you will, to suspend my judgment and then see how I can display mercy. So, and I think about people in my life that are that way, that I've experienced in my life, who have shown mercy to me, or I've seen them in showing mercy to others. And I'm always encouraged and challenged by it when I see it. So I think it's a patient person, probably what I'd say, Luke. And it's hard to cultivate right now, because we're just in such a snap judgment society. So, I'll give you a quick example.
Please do.
Saturday afternoon, watching Auburn basketball. I mean, I got my Auburn.
For those of you listening, Dr. Wiles is fully decked out in Auburn.
If you can
today.
just hear the rustle
it's
of a champion's jacket.
Yeah, it's kind of a jacket, for Auburn.
And then he's got a light blue quarter zip over a
blue and orange shirt.
Blue and orange
That actually has
shirt.
an Auburn logo on it. You just can't see it. But it's right there close to my
That's
heart.
for those of you listening at home.
Right.
And is that undershirt?
The undershirt's just plain old.
Oh, okay.
Plain anything.
Well, we'll work on that. We'll see how far they go in
all good.
in the tournament before we get branded undergarments.
Yeah. So, Auburn is playing Saturday, and they're playing in Tuscaloosa, which is a very challenging environment for Auburn teams to play in. And it just so happens that Auburn's men's basketball team is ranked number 1 in America, and Alabama's team is ranked number 2 by the Associated Press.
That's tense.
Yeah. And so it's the very first time.
If this was football, that'd be like a college game day destination.
So college game day was in Tuscaloosa. Do
they do basketball?
They do basketball.
That shows you what I know.
Yeah. And they were in Tuscaloosa, and a big day. It was, full out, full on, everything you could imagine. And it's the first time in the history of the Southeastern Conference where there's been a number 1 team playing a number 2 team. It's just never happened before. And not only that, there's a coaches poll that's not quite as well recognized as the AP, but it's still very well recognized. Well, Alabama's number 1 in that poll, and Auburn's number 2. So it's the first time in history that in the SEC that a number 1 team is against a number 2 team, and actually a number 1 team is against a number 1 team, if that makes sense. So huge build-up, very high, a lot of tension in the game. And of course, I'm a huge Auburn. Y'all know me, and so
I had no idea.
Yeah, so
anybody
and Auburn wins.
within the sound of your voice.
Yes, Auburn wins. But we have a player that plays for Auburn who's a little bit controversial. He's very emotional, and he's just known for, just sometimes engaging with the crowd. Let's just say this: he's only a fan favorite at Auburn. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
Oh yeah, everybody else
Does
hates
that
him.
make sense?
Everybody else hates playing him.
But he's also really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's what really makes it difficult, because he's hard to cover. He's left-handed, which is a little dicey in basketball, because a lot of times when you're playing basketball, you play against so many right-handed players, you can't help it. I used to play basketball, so you lean in a certain way. Well, you play him, that's death.
I want to finish there. I played basketball in high school. Our starting team, my senior year, 4 left-handed girls and 1 right-handed.
Yeah,
isn't that wild?
It is, and
Anyway.
it's something you have to consciously.
And it was definitely to our advantage, because you're trained to guard the right hand.
Exactly.
Anyway,
he's just interesting.
Flashy. It sounds like he'd do fine in the NBA.
Yeah, I love him. So, I'm like I said, I'm biased.
Well, it's because he's playing for your team.
At one point in the game.
Where's this going with Mercy, though?
At one point in the game.
It makes me think.
He gets knocked into the crowd. Okay. And there are people sitting on the kind of the end zone, if you want to call it, that end of the basket. Well, if you sit there, that as big as these boys are nowadays, if y'all haven't been to a basketball game lately of Division I college basketball players, let me just tell you, they're grown men. They're not like they used to be. Okay, no. When I was coming along, these are grown men. Well, he gets knocked into the crowd. Well, anytime that happens, obviously fans know you have to somehow rescue. It's not like he's trying to come in and knock all your drinks over. And that's not what's happening. He's playing hard, and he gets knocked into the crowd. Well, when he does, you can look it up. There are several memes about it today. I've seen them all over. They're trying to help him up. Well, one of the people that's trying to help him up, you can tell it wasn't really helping him up. It was, a little more of
taunting?
You can tell it's a little more aggressive than you might normally think. So when that happens, he kind of turns around to confront or to say something. We don't really know what he said. Well, there's a lady who was sitting, I guess I don't know if it was her husband, whoever it was, and she just jumps up, and starts pointing her finger in his face and really, arguing. Just whatever. And she's become a meme. I've seen several things about her, and so all the Auburn fans have quickly said, well, there you go. As a typical Alabama fan, look at this. This is a college kid. Come on. Grow up. Get a life. You're sitting on the very front row. You're going to get – but then there's a lot of other things in her life. I've read a couple other things about some issues, and I'm thinking it's so quick. And I even did it Saturday. I was like, come on, don't be pointing your finger in the face of this little college kid, Well, anyway, turns out there's a little bit more going on than we probably all knew. And that's just a little small thing of just how quickly she became a phenom in all the Auburn media stuff, she's now representative of the entire Alabama fan base. There was no other Alabama fan that attacked a basketball player Saturday, or what I mean? So, but there's just in my society right now, any one thing you see, it's like immediately you got the full judgment. You know who they are. You know what they're actually really like outside of that arena. You know everything about them, and then all of a sudden you're done. You can just dismiss them. So that's my society, and I'm trying to figure out how do you build a church to live in that kind of environment and just not do that. Right.
And it sounds like even to describe a merciful person, much like the semantic domain and the difficulty to describe like a hesed, that's my English translation. Yeah.
Good job.
It's hard to describe, like to pinpoint one attribute of a merciful person.
Correct.
It's like it has its own domain of godliness, steadfastness, loving kindness.
Yes.
Patience.
But what I hear is, it's a person of patience, maturity, some wisdom and discernment. Certainly not that quick triggeredness that we are plagued by. Right. I would even add just what we're seeing, like a layer beyond that, is like critical thinking. Not taking everything at face value.
Yes.
Certainly don't believe every headline you see. My gosh, think about some things. Right. There's some merciful character qualities that are that rootedness that we're if that's Psalm 1 tree.
And again, it doesn't mean you're some milquetoast, just easy to run over person. Jesus wasn't.
No, and that's not God's mercy. I mean, think about God's mercy.
Well, it's important to remember that this follows.
Behind it.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness.
Exactly.
Which is justice.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
And so they live together in the same sermon. And I think, it's kind of that old, we've talked about this before, but that old Stephen Covey story about him getting on that subway and the guy getting on with the kids running rampant on the subway car. And everybody's going, somebody needs to say something. He finally does, tells the guy, hey, man, your kids are running wild. And he goes, yeah, I guess they are. We just came from the hospital. Their mom just died. I don't really know what to do. Well, all of a sudden, Stephen Covey says you turn into a merciful person.
Right, the whole railway car, if they knew.
Yeah, everybody's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But again, it's just that reminder of, okay, be what is it? Slow to speak, quick to listen. I mean, that whole idea that, okay, there's a lot going on here that I could somehow embrace. Now, again, it doesn't mean you excuse behavior. That's what I mean about figuring out this way to live it.
I think that's helpful to hear, too, because, y'all have ministered long enough and lived life with people. I have people in my office that are trying to figure out how to put up boundaries. How am I still loving to my family member or my friend.
Exactly.
But how do I have we can't go beyond this.
That's
You
right.
have done this,
That's
and
right.
therefore this.
That's right.
I have a lot of those conversations, so it is helpful to address how to not be, and this is its own 10-week course, so I'm not trying to fit it in like a 90-second blurb. Right. But how do you not be a doormat,
Right.
but also exhibit the deep, deep love of Jesus? And that is really hard for Christians.
It is.
Because you want to be generous and you want to exhibit grace, right?
Yeah, because I think sometimes what happens, mercy sometimes to me is also an internal phenomenon, because you may have to implement certain behaviors that do draw boundaries that limit another person's ability to continue to hurt you. But even with that said, you still on the inside can release them from what they've already done that's hurt you, so that you don't have to harbor and carry around the bitterness and the brokenness of it, but you can build whatever it is that you need to build in your life to keep it from continuing to happen. Somehow that's the nuance that's very difficult to do, but I think that's what we're supposed to do and what we have to do. And I think that's why the church right now, to me, has an opportunity to step into a moment in our society and show our society a very different way to live and a transformative way to live. Matthew's a great example. That's why I pointed Matthew out to me as a great example of someone who received the mercy of Jesus. Zacchaeus, we could have used him, And what I love about the story in Zacchaeus, when Jesus met Zacchaeus and said, "Hey, I'm come to your house." He's very similar to Matthew, they have the same job basically. But Zacchaeus doesn't leave and go follow Jesus, but Zacchaeus goes back and becomes an honest tax collector, if there was such a thing in that day. It turns out you could do it. It was just really hard to do. There was too much temptation. There was too much power. There was too much available to you. But Zacchaeus went back and if y'all remember, he repaid all these people that he had cheated, gave charity to those who were hurting, and I believe returned to his life. But he was a transformed person. He was transformed by the mercy of Jesus that was still tinged with justice. In other words, he didn't say, "Well, just keep doing what you're doing, Zacchaeus. I'm really proud of you." Well, that must not be what happened in that conversation in his home. I believe he was confronted with real, true justice, but he received mercy. And then what I would like to believe is he became a merciful person. One of Matthew's situation was a little different because he was called to be one of the original disciples. I get that. But he still had to overcome those tendencies that he had been living in for so long, because you can't help but believe that a person in his position was every single day was taking advantage of other people. I mean, that's kind of the system that was set up. Well, somehow he had to walk away from that, be transformed somehow, and become a very different person, which obviously he did. So I think that's a beautiful example of someone who knew about mercy. And that's why I think it's a beautiful thing that he's one of the ones that actually writes all this down for us, a guy who was actually transformed by this message, this person of Jesus that he met. And to me, that transformation is a part of the beauty of Christianity. And that's what I'm hopeful for in our society, to have churches that are examples of the transformational power of the gospel, so that you can see it. It's kind of like, remember that story where Peter and John heal, the lame man, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't know what to do with him. They're trying to figure it out. But the people are all saying, well, he's 40 years old. He's been laying here his whole life, and all we know is he's walking around now. So you can
do what you want
call
with
it
that.
whatever you want to call it, but we know, we see him. He's changed. That's what I'm talking about, to see people that are changed. And you're like, okay, how did this happen? Well, it's meeting Jesus. It's receiving the mercy of God. But the mercy of God comes with a hand that is, in my opinion, that's balanced and somehow is just. I'm confronted with my own brokenness, my own sinfulness, but there's still mercy in God's response to it. So somehow figuring out how to do that individually, because that's where to me the rubber hits the road. It's one thing to have a conversation about some issue in society. When we were all in seminary, I'm not sure how it worked with y'all at Truett. But at Southwestern in those days, our pedagogy was a little different. It's a little more systematic than the way y'all did it. Right. We had more of, I'm not
Ours
saying
is more narrative, historical.
I'm not saying it's unsystematic, so I'm not saying that critically.
No, but we never took systematic theology.
No, we just had these defined categories that had their own academic life, and in order to get your MDiv, you had to visit all of them. So you actually had to take a class in Christian ethics, And so, well, it's one thing to sit in a classroom and debate, pick a topic, pick an ethical topic, abortion, or, there's so many of them in society. And, write papers on them and have conversations. And you're basically, for the most part, dealing with hypotheticals and things that you think could work, or you wish this is the ideal. Maybe this could somehow be woven into the fabric of society. I get all of that. And there's a certain role that we have in that to some degree. But let's be honest, most days, that's not where we live.
No.
Most days we live in relationships with real people who are doing real things in real time that we have to figure out what to do with. That's really where we live, I could sit here right now and have a conversation with y'all about abortion. I can do that. And I think I'm well versed in it. I think
let's talk
I
about
think
the
you're
gay
well
issue.
qualified.
Let's talk about the gay issue.
Yeah, or homosexuality. Right? Just pick something.
Yeah.
But actually, where I live my life, though, every day is not in that realm of conversation. I'm living my life every day with real people who engage me in all manner of relationships, whether they're in my family, they're in my church, they're in my friend circle, or they're somehow connected to me professionally. And we're dealing with relational issues all day long, every single day. And sometimes there's hurt.
And it turns out they're all different from all the others.
Exactly. There's anger, there's frustration, there's disappointment, there's hurt, there's intentional hurt, there's unintentional hurt.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah. Deep misunderstandings, words that are said. And that's the world I actually live in. And to me, that's where this sermon or this scripture text from Jesus lives. It's learning to be merciful.
And at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Exactly.
A thesis at a school is one thing and valuable. You need to know what you believe.
And necessary and helpful.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying it's not.
But Jesus is more, I think, interested in us living out life with people in real time.
So how do you
exhibiting
treat your
his
children?
love? Yeah.
What kind? Your children mess up. Okay. Y'all's kids are young. Yours really young, Katie.
And they really mess up.
But in due time. So how do you talk to them? How do you decide to bring corrective, which is your responsibility as a parent? How do you decide to bring corrective action in the life of your child as they get to the point where they need it? What a great question, because that's where you live. What do you do with a conversation with your spouse where y'all actually disagree on something that really matters, that's important to you? And because of their position, it just rubs you the wrong way. Okay, what do you do with that as a Christian? Or what do you do at work when you're being overlooked for something and good and well you deserve it, and the guy or the lady sitting next to you actually gets the credit for it, and now you're sitting there knowing it was yours, and they're the ones getting all the accolades, or they get the promotion over you because of some other factor, and you've got to decide what to do. That's where we really live. So learning to be Christian in that's really what I think Jesus is after. And I think that's why he was with the people so much. And I think that's why people were drawn to him, because he talked about those kind of things, live this way, treat people like this. And he showed us, in how he treated people, how to do that. But I also know that since it doesn't come naturally, I've got to have the power of the gospel, the presence of the Holy Spirit shaping me and changing me, but I've got to participate in it. And that's really another thing I wanted to point out Sunday morning. It's not just going to happen to you, You got to give this some attention. I'm not going to naturally wake up every day and be merciful and gracious. I'm just not. I've lived long enough to know that about myself. But with the power of the gospel at work in me, guess what? I can be. And then I know it's transformative, because what I've learned about mercy and grace, both of them, I believe that it's more transformative when you give it than when you get it. Once you become a Christian, that's the most transformative thing ever. We'll say that. But once you're a believer, after that, giving mercy and grace is some of the most transformative things that ever happens in your life. So I think it's a beautiful thing. So, yeah.
That's a good word.
It's a great invitation to become something greater than what we are now in Christ.
Amen.
And only in Christ can we get there.
Exactly.
It's a lifelong journey of transformation.
And look how desperately I believe our world needs people like us to live that way.
Every day. It's just a spiritual discipline.
I
Showing
love
up to God every day.
I love it.
Letting him transform our lives.
Yeah. I think Dallas Willard has a quote that gets said, and it's, grace is opposed to earning, not to effort. And really what that means is you can't earn God's grace. So by living this way, acting this way, you're not going to get more of God's grace for yourself because you earned
impressing
it.
God.
But you can work.
You can.
towards your own transformation in partnership with the Spirit.
You can.
Effort is a factor
It's a
here.
good thing.
It's a great thing.
Oh, and we can help.
How can we help?
We actually,
I feel like that was a segue.
We actually built this church in order to become more like Jesus.
That's right.
As people. It's actually why we're here.
I'm holding up a mug that says the Jesus way.
That is
So
right.
actually, everything we're trying to do
Let's do it
is to
together.
help people become more like
Yeah,
Jesus.
let's do it together.
What can you do this week? Well, I'd say come Wednesday night and hang out.
At the Forum, 6 p.m.
Yeah, we're going to talk about trust, building trust, reclaiming trust. What is it like when trust is lost? Because it's all about relationships. On Wednesday nights, we're talking about relationships. As part of this flourishing, as part of one of the domains of flourishing is close social relationships. And so we're talking about how do you have close relationships? Well, building and rebuilding trust is one of those. It's a key. It's a key to any deep relationship, particularly rebuilding trust, because you're going to have, like we're talking about.
Conflict happens.
You have conflict. You have to learn how to forgive and work through that. And so we're going to talk about that on Wednesday. But all ages, we've got programs. If you love to sing, we've got a choir. If you play an instrument, we've got an orchestra.
Grief share, divorce care.
Grief share, divorce care. You can walk into those anytime as well. It's good. I mean, just because they're rolling doesn't mean if you need that support, you can still get it. I want you to know that. But that's Wednesday night. And then Sunday morning, if y'all, some of y'all may listen, but you're not plugged in. We're glad you're listening, but we'd love you to be plugged in. So we've got
be
Bible
with us.
studies and just people that are willing to know you.
I'm really good at helping people find a Bible study.
Come find Luke on a Sunday morning, and he'll help you find a Bible study.
Awesome.
And we
And
just
then this
want you to be
Sunday-
part of the body. What's this Sunday?
We are passing out gift bags for you to give your Muslim friends, neighbors, coworkers, because
Ramadan.
Friday the 28th starts the month on their lunar calendar of Ramadan, which is a period of fasting. So for Muslims, it's a deeply spiritual time. So we'll have gift bags. I'll have a mug. We'll have a card on some other things that you could add to it.
So
that would
Luke,
make
are
it
you
a good
telling
gift.
me that if you pass out something this Sunday, it's going to cover something that happens on February 28th? Did I just hear that right?
Yeah.
We are zooming
We are.
through this
Come on
year.
now. Come on now.
Wow.
Wow.
So this Sunday, get a Ramadan bag.
And we'll pass those out 2 weeks in a row until we run out. And we did run out last year.
We did.
We're trying to do even more of them this year.
Let's do it.
But grab a bag, and if you come pick up a bag, we'll walk you through this. But just take it to your neighbor and say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. I don't like to say Christian to Muslims in our area because they think Santa Claus is basically what that is. Like it's the commercial Christmas that you see in
Christian's
culture.
a loaded word right now.
So just say, I'm a follower of Jesus. They love Jesus. They respect Jesus. Say, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm praying for you during this spiritual time in your life. And that's all you have to say.
Just see where it
And
goes.
actually, doors will open.
Yeah. And
when
if it
do
makes you
that.
a little bit uncomfortable, it makes all of us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You just have to go in with that posture of humility
We do.
and
But
trusting God to lead us.
we had
Yeah.
church members who did this last year. They got invited. They break the fast every evening when the sun sets. We had church members who actually got invited to go do that meal in Muslim homes as they were breaking fast. And they were doing Lent at the same time. And so they actually got to talk about, well, we're doing Lent. We're fasting right now, too.
Right.
Here's why we fast.
Yeah,
That's
here's some
awesome.
bridges. Here's just
So there's a lot of potential.
ripe for conversation.
So this Sunday, we'll have bags for you to pass out to your Muslim friends, neighbors, coworkers.
I love it.
I love
That's
it.
Great.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Well,
Alrighty. Look at us.
We made a podcast.
and we'll be back next Monday. Thank y'all. Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.